Hello and welcome to my testimony part 3. For any of you who have seen part 1, so much for the 10 minutes. So look, up to now, summarising. I said my life was an utter mess about 10 years ago, and taking the example of the Rubik's Cube, I don't think there was any side of my life that was any way in order. From relationships, sexuality, to job, meaning of life, purpose of life. And then part 2, I mentioned that I discovered the power of the Holy Spirit, or more, I guess, the Holy Spirit discovered me or revealed himself to me. And then that brought me on a journey of realizing and seeing that Jesus is alive today and can heal today and wants to heal today, just like he did when he walked the earth some 2,000 years ago. And so I guess today maybe I'll just continue where I left off and just discussing some of the problems and troubleshooting that I encountered. So I thought, ironically, that when I had this experience of the Holy Spirit, and when Jesus and Mary started speaking to me, and they asked me to go to France, I thought that all I had to do was go into a church, tell a priest, and hallelujah. But was I in for a surprise? I went into a church, I told a priest, and the more I spoke, the more I saw his face dimming, just like those dimmer switches when you turn down the lights. And I said to myself, oh dear, this is going down like a lead balloon. And so I began to realize that a lot of people didn't believe me, and even unfortunately a lot of priests thought I was, as we'd say in Ireland, away with the fairies. Cuckoo. Cuckoo! So this was quite scary, and I wasn't expecting this. And I guess it made me really, really sad, because I said to myself, how many people today are in psychiatric hospitals? How many people today are on very heavy doses of medication, antidepressant medication, maybe antipsychotic medication, all the stuff that Jesus had told me to flush down the toilet? And how many people, just like me, needed healing from Jesus? And how many people perhaps were having demonic experiences, like I mentioned in the last section, and weren't being believed? And they needed deliverance. They needed freedom from inner wounds. They needed freedom from spirits, and again, weren't being believed. And I had been on medication on and off for years. And if I was taking Maltesers or Smarties or Skittles, they would have had more of an effect. And that's why one day when I was praying, Jesus said to me, Michael, when you were taking that rubbish, it did nothing for you. Why do you think it would do anything to you if you stopped taking it? I said, that's a good point. And just like that, I did what you're not supposed to do, apparently. I just stopped all medication, antidepressant and that type of calmants and all that, all overnight, and I never had the least side effect, because I had a new medication, and the new medication was going to Mass every day, and Jesus became my new medication. But as I said, when I encountered the church in France, it was very, very difficult. And I realized, to my shock really, that most priests didn't seem to be trained in the area of the gifts and charisms of the Holy Spirit, in the area of inner healing, healing of memories, healing of inner wounds, healing of all these traumas that happen to people, and weren't aware either of the reality of demons and spirits, and things like exorcisms and that sort of stuff was kind of like we associate with Hollywood films, but people didn't realize that these type of spiritual things can affect everybody. And so at times I used to go through the most horrific spiritual experiences and have no one to tell. And at times, to be honest with you, I used to think I was going to die. And the saddest part was being surrounded at times by priests, being surrounded at times by religious, and yet the very people who ordinarily you'd think should be able to understand and could understand, didn't understand. And that for me at times used to make me so, so sad. And I often remember meeting at times people that were suffering from, in the eyes of the world at least, psychiatric conditions. And I used to say to myself, you guys so, so badly need prayer, but I don't know where to send you. I don't know priests, I don't know people that I could actually tell you where to go. And so Jesus allowed me to spend 1 year in the seminary in France. And to be honest with you, that year was one of the hardest years of my life. And my first experience and my first day, I was given out to, because I stayed back after Mass for about 30 seconds to give thanks to Jesus. And I had my eyes closed, and when I opened my eyes, the room was empty, the chapel was empty, and everyone had gone for lunch. And guess what? They were all waiting for me. And I started thinking like, oh my goodness, like, you're the future priest. I'm giving thanks to Jesus because I'm just after eating his body, drinking his blood, and I'm being given out to because I'm giving thanks. And I said to myself, Jesus, this is like a ticking time bomb. I'm not going to fit in there. They're not going to want me, and I'm not going to want them. After a year, that was the case. My experience at the seminary, as a lady in Australia once dubbed it, the cemetery, was exactly that. And so I think Jesus allowed me to experience that, just to see the lack of formation. And it's not that they're bad people, they're good people. Well, good people who are not being adequately trained in the reality of these spiritual things. And I guess because at that age, I was 26, 27, I guess around that age, and I already had a career in finance up to that point. The academic training for anything is quite easy. If you're academic, you just do the study. But you can't fake or you can't acquire human experience. And so I said to myself, okay, this isn't for me. And so I left the seminary, and when I walked out of the seminary, I was cursed by the priest. He told me I was too weak, I was too fragile, I would never amount to anything, I should give up, nobody would believe me, nobody would want me. And I guess I said to myself, well, he's probably right, I am weak, I am fragile, I am all these things, but on the other hand, the more weak I am, the more strong Jesus can be. And so something in me prayed to the Saint Teresa of the Child Jesus and said, no, the weaker I am, the better it is for God's grace, so I will just keep on going. And so God opened up another extraordinary door, and through a very nice priest that I met through the community of St. John in France, he invited me to go to India. So I had 2 weeks to pack my bags and go to India. And so I arrived in India, quite sad, actually devastated in a way leaving France, because I always loved France, and it was very sad for me that France didn't seem to love me in the same way. And so when I arrived in India, I worked with Mother Teresa Sisters of Charity, looking after some orphan kids. And I even had a miraculous experience there of being given one little girl, Sophia, to look after. And Sophia had been abandoned at the side of the road. Her mother was beside her, but her mother had died. And she was mentally a bit retarded and physically as well. Or disabled, I guess, as people maybe say today. But and I was given the job of trying to help her to walk. But her legs were like jelly. And one day, and it's God's glory, but one day as I was praying over her, I prayed to Jesus to help her. My hand got hot, and all of a sudden she was able to walk. And if I'm honest with you, I was petrified. Not petrified that she could walk, but I was petrified, what on earth am I going to tell the sisters? What have you done? Oh, Jesus did it, it wasn't me. Anyway, there was one sister there, and she was an angel, and so it was okay. But after about a month, or actually no, it was maybe a few months on, but anyway, after about a month I met a lady who introduced me to the Divine Retreat Centre. And so the Divine Retreat Centre in India, I was introduced to a Catholic Charismatic Healing Centre, and it was amazing. It's the largest Catholic Charismatic Retreat Centre in the world, and when it came to inner healing, healing of memories, devils, demons, spirits, gifts, charisms, visions, hearing Jesus, seeing Jesus, smelling Padre Pio, smelling roses, you were a weirdo if it wasn't happening to you. You were mentally ill if it wasn't happening to you. You were a crazy man if it wasn't happening to you. Living on Providence, normal. And I was thinking like, wow, how is this the same church? How after 3 years in France I've got beaten down, I've got abused, I've got mocked, I've got ridiculed, I've got sent to psychiatrists, I've got utterly, utterly beaten. And now I can go to India, the same Catholic church, the same priest, the same church, and all of a sudden it's normal. And so I began to realize that there was a big difference between the Catholic healing, charismatic side of the church and the more traditional side of the church. And so from India, Jesus opened up a door for me to go to Australia. And so I moved to Australia. And again I became involved with the Catholic charismatic group in Australia. And while I had a lot of good experiences there, it wasn't really a welcome place for my testimony. Talking openly about things like demons and spirits and sexual confusion wasn't encouraged. And while everyone always taught us that it was the most powerful thing we had was our testimony, there seemed to be no room for my testimony. And so after 6 months, I prayed, and Jesus opened up a door for me to go to Sydney. And in Sydney, he did something extraordinary, almost terrible. He introduced me to Protestants. And so a lot of my Catholic friends thought that I had lost the plot. But the Protestant Pentecostal people that I met were the most spirit-filled, loving people that I'd ever met. They welcomed me, they accepted me, they were familiar with spiritual experiences, Holy Spirit, evil spirit. There was even had a special ministry dealing with healing of sexuality and the whole lot. And so Jesus opened my eyes to the fact that his Holy Spirit is bigger than the institutional boundaries that at times we may put on him. And so I'll always be eternally grateful to the group that I met in Ramsgate, Australia, for all the help that they gave me. And so after a few years there, Jesus sent me back to Ireland, and he sent me back to my family, and he even sent me back to the psychiatrist, where I got to talk to the psychiatrist for months. And the psychiatrist, after talking to him, explained to him all my journey, all my spirituality, said that I had absolutely no mental illness, absolutely nothing. And if I'm honest, it took a while for my parents to accept that, because people have been so convinced that if I went to see a psychiatrist that they would write me off. And so now I can sit here smiling and say, look, I live a crazy life. Jesus talks to me every day. I have experiences of Jesus and Mary every single day. I live on providence. The supernatural for me is natural. And I can also say that the psychiatrists have even told me that I'm normal. And so I smile today. I don't take any tablets. My only medication is prayer. My only medication is Jesus. And so if there's anyone out there suffering despair, depression, hopelessness, you need help. And the help, his name is Jesus. He's free. He's available 24 hours a day. He costs nothing. He is powerful. He will listen to you. You don't need to book an appointment. He never gets tired. He's awesome. So, praise Jesus.